over 2.5 wins.
By the way, Judas, that is a masterful tease. That is a masterful tease that's set up right before you brought me on.
Thank you.
I want to hear the call.
Thank you. Well, maybe we'll make sure you have a meter on you, though, because we would like the ratings.
Yeah, we get that in.
Kevin, so our first chance to talk to you on the week is always Thursdays, so I know we're still a couple days removed from the last Eagles game, but we'd love to get your thoughts on the Eagles going down to New Orleans. The New Orleans Saints, who are putting up crazy numbers the first 2 weeks, Eagles held them offensively, just 12 points, and the Eagles get the win. What was your thoughts to the Week 3 victory for the Birds?
I think it just reveals the talent on the roster, right? That was a talent wins out type of game when the talent shows up, the first-round talent, especially on that defensive front. And it's great to see Jalen Carter unleashed. I mean, when he plays the way he played this weekend, it just changes the entire dynamic of the defense and the approach. So I think that really set the tone. And thankfully, the Eagles have Saquon Barkley because, and I think we're going to say that this weekend too. When you look at who's going to be available and who can play and who can't in the offense, I'm just really grateful. I know he's sort of the GOAT there in that Falcons game, and I'm not meaning it as the greatest of all time. I'm meaning it like a lot of people blamed him for not catching that pass. He took a ton of responsibility. And that long run meant a hell of a lot to him, that he wanted to kind of redeem himself, and he's been carrying this offense. And I think that when you lose the dynamic possibility of A.J. Brown stretching the field and the attention falls on 26, he always finds a way to respond. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for them to get a win. It's amazing about the NFL, right? That the Falcons had no business beating the Eagles on Monday night if you watched the game. Yet the Falcons won. And to a certain extent, the Eagles had no business winning that game against the Saints.
Oh, of course.
And they won. So it's the balance of the NFL. I will be very curious to see how this team responds in Tampa with the Bucs now, because the Bucs are coming off a real bad taste in their mouth. So this continues to be, I think, a learning curve for everybody and for the fan base to see where this team is in measuring how they feel in Fangio's defense, Kellen Moore's offense, and the head coach, Nick Sirianni, just trying to get one thing right on a fourth down call.
The one thing that I'm concerned about with my old college classmates, since it's a Temple segment, taking over those Tampa Bay Bucks, I know what he's going to bring on Jalen Hurts all day long on Sunday. And when there's no Brown, and then there's you got no Devontae Smith most likely, and no Lane Johnson potentially. I mean, this could be a really, really long day because Todd is spending all this week looking to exploit the fill-ins and figuring out how to stop them.
That's a phenomenal observation by you, because if you looked at the two previous games against Todd Bowles, Jalen Hurts has. It's like Todd Bowles has figured out the game plan for the entire league on that blitz and making sure you're applying pressure to the comfort zone of where Jalen Hurts likes to roll out, right? He did that in that first playoff game where Brady was on the field. We were at that game, and I thought Bowles' game plan and attack was fantastic. Leave it to a Temple Owl. And then, I thought last year we're going to just continue to do it until they stop it. Wouldn't you continue to do it till they stop it? And the Eagles haven't figured it out. Now that you have Kellen Moore, what's your response, right? How are you going to handle that? Do you give help? Do you have Saquon in the backfield chipping a little bit more, Gainwell chipping? I think they're going to get a lot of touches. And you know what? Don't be afraid about the dump off. If you've got to dump it off, man, there's a reason. You've got 26, and let him try to cook a little bit when these blitzes come in, because you're going to see a ton of pressure on Hurts, and he's going to have to figure it out, especially when you lose the short passing game with Covey. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but he's played a big role here on those short dump offs.
He certainly has.
And then you lose him, and the addition of Stoll is interesting because they may go a lot of two tight end sets here for quick passes and extra protection. So it's a great point. I'll be curious to see if we have Devontae play and coming out of the protocol, if he's still in the concussion protocol. So it's going to be a big challenge, and I'm going to see a lot of 26.
Oh, yeah, we should expect it.
Let's hope we do, yes.
We're speaking to Kevin Negandhi on the Comcast Business Hotline. Kevin, Stephen A. Smith, we played a clip of his early in the show today. It's been one of our main topics today. He went on to say during First Take yesterday that maybe some of the Eagles players should be taking on some of the blame as well for the rocky start. Even though they're 2-1, for the rocky start, he's not absolving Nick Sirianni of blame, but it seems like everybody is talking about Nick Sirianni as to why they're 2-1, could be 1-2, right? Obviously, Saquon dropped it, but maybe the play call wasn't great. Do you think the players should get some more blame, or do you think it's been fair throughout?
So it's very hard for me to weigh in on what Stephen A. Smith said because I have no context on exactly where he's putting the blame on which players.
He just said, look, Hurts has 6 turnovers already this year. Saquon Barkley drops the pass that they could have won the football game on. Obviously, the pass rush in week 2, which was horrible, which is why Kirk Cousins was able to go downfield. But we talk so much about Sirianni and his decision-making. I mean, I can tell you just from what we do on a daily basis, Nick Sirianni's been talked about. It's been Nick Sirianni radio here the last 2 weeks.
Well, I will say that, the Falcons game, Sirianni got most of the blame because he's the head coach. But, it was a collective loss because the defense was atrocious on that final drive.
Yeah, wait a minute, though. One thing. You're head coach. You're supposed to do everything you can, and he says it over and over, to put your players in the best position to succeed. Best position to succeed is to take 40 seconds off the clock before you give the Falcons the ball back and make them drive all the way to beat you with a 6-point lead.
Totally agree. I'm not disputing that. I was exactly on that attitude as well. But your coach also put you in a bad spot. You still have to step up, right? You can't make it a 7-on-7. And it felt like a 7-on-7.
It did.
You can't touch the quarterback, right, on that final drive.
And then Hurts throws the pick, the next drive.
Here's where coaching plays a role. Fangio adjusted, right? He adjusted in the Saints game. And then you also saw that he had the attention of the defense, and they responded. I thought that was a completely different attitude and approach where it felt like the players felt a little more responsible on the defensive side than they did in that Falcons game, right? And it's 100% right on some of the blame with Jalen Hurts on decision-making. I mean, let's not forget, one of the big reasons why the success of 2022 in that season was Hurts did a phenomenal job of protecting the ball and being aware of when to throw it, when to run, when not to force it, right? So if you have 6 early turnovers, that plays a role and puts your team in a bad spot, especially some of those turnovers in the red zone, what we've seen in the early part of the season. So I think everybody this is not to me, there's nuance in the conversation, right? This is not an absolute blame on one person, but at the same time, to John's point, there are many instances that the coaches put them in really tough situations. And tell me one 4th down call Nick Sirianni has nailed. He hasn't nailed one this season. Right. That's the problem, right? When you're in those situations where you have to score points and these games are coming down to the final possession, as we have seen the last 3 games, you've got to get it right on keeping the team on the field at the right moment, going for the points at the right moment, and taking time off the clock at the right moment. We haven't had the coach that has made those right decisions yet. He hasn't hit on one of those decisions, guys. And I know a lot of things can change if Saquon makes that catch, but you got to be aware that anything can happen. And where do I minimize the mistakes, potentially, right? And the coach right now hasn't hit on any of them, and he's got to eventually when you look at these close games.
I got to tell you this, is that I think I feel more positive about the 2024 Eagles than I did the 2023 Eagles because I just think there's more adults in the room and more competent minds in the room. So I'm going to let this thing breathe a little bit. And, Kevin, if they leave 2-2, hampered like this by injury, and they go into the bye 2-2, it's not going to change my opinion on what I think this team can accomplish long term. And it sounds like you're leaning that way, too.
To your point, John, are you saying that because of the
coordinators? Yes, and also Saquon. What about Saquon? His leadership, and I know you've interviewed him. His leadership, his calm poise is just that's got to mean something to me.
I agree. If they go in 2-2 and they're beat up the way they are, it'd be frustrating because that Falcons game is going to linger there. But look at the way the division is, and if you're at 2-2. And you can rest up another week, and then you reload. I feel a little bit better. I feel a little bit better just seeing the effort and the change in the defensive approach. It's just nice to see the 2 Georgia kids actually step up on that defensive line in that Saints game, right?
Absolutely.
That gave me some hope. That gave me some hope that somebody in the locker room has their attention and some accountability, right? That's the key. Are you accountable to who you are as a person, to the team, and the coaching staff? And it felt like that defense came out with some accountability. So I'm with you on that. There are two reasons, and you brought in Saquon, right? You brought him up. I completely agree with that. I will also bring up CJ. I think CJ Gardner-Johnson, while he can sometimes make some mistakes, there is a certain attitude and accountability that he has on that defense, no matter what, and a swagger that we didn't have last year that I will take regardless of the situation, and that helps.
Absolutely. Kevin, last thing before we let you go. Real quick, preference. Diamondbacks, Brewers, Mets, Padres, Braves, if you had to pick.
Gosh.
I can't wait to hear this answer. We've all, by the way, have a lot of different discussion on this today.
I want nothing to do with the Padres right now. Mm-hmm. If you've seen the way they've played, I want nothing to do with it. The Padres are what the Phillies were, the last 2 years, playing really hot in the final 2 months. And I know I should say the final month. I don't want anything to do right now with whatever the Mets are doing, because there's something weird and magical, and you're like, oh, God, they've been a different team, because it's not about the money. It's just they're playing like a team, and they've done that since the London series. So I will put it that way. Those are the two. I'm like, let's just try to just move on, and let's avoid the hot team more than anything else. It comes down to this, though, guys. It comes down to, if you had to trade and talk to any fan base, they would take our roster and our front line pitching and our bullpen over anybody. Trust me. The key will be specifically this the rest of the playoffs. Can our top hitter, our leadoff guy, can our second hitter, and can our third hitter, the franchise, can all of them get on the same page? Can all of them avoid getting in a slump together? If one of them starts to consistently